Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Retirement Compass, the show dedicated to helping you successfully navigate to and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio are two financial advisors from Stonebridge Wealth Systems. We have the co-founder, Tim Kolhanek, and partner, Jeremy Gove. Tim, Jeremy, I look forward to this time with you every week. I know our viewers do as well. Great to be back with you.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, we look forward to it as well, Kristen.
Well, thank you. And one of the fun things we've been doing this little mini series, kind of playing off this whole Goldilocks concept, because there's so much in retirement that you want to get just right. You know, the reality is you only retire one time. You have helped hundreds of people retire successfully, but for our viewers, you want to retire just once and you want to get it right. And so there's so many different pieces that fit into that puzzle to get it right. So today, we're calling today's show Goldilocks and the 3 risk buckets. Do you have too much risk? Is there even such a thing as having too little risk? How much risk should you actually be taking with your investment? So it's going to be a really fun conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Important conversation.
Important, for sure. So we've got some data that sets up how important this actually is. This is the latest retirement data from Fidelity Investments, and the amount of 401ks on their platform that have now reached and hold over $1 million in them, it's almost 500,000. So think about that. Then we also have benefits administrator Alight Solutions found that on average, 401k investors have over 70% of their balances invested in higher risk investments like stocks and stock funds. So this is really interesting. And, I think back to 2008 when folks, the saying was your 401k often went to a 201k overnight, meaning folks lost substantial amounts of money. Part of the reason was they had never adjusted how much risk they were taking. So this is a serious conversation because folks are depending on these accounts to, last them for the rest of their lives. You want to make sure you're taking the right amount of risk with them, right?
Yeah, and so I think the first thing we have to understand is what does Tim mean? What does Jeremy mean? What are they talking about when they're talking about risk buckets? And the reality is, yes, I don't want all my eggs in one basket, but a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll buy 5 stocks instead of 2. Well, you're still in stocks, and stocks tend to act the same, right? They're going to be more volatile. They're correlated. They're highly correlated. They're going to move up and down in the same direction at the same time. And so when we're talking about risk buckets, we've actually got a graphic we've put together for you that we're going to pull on screen, and we're going to show you the 3 different risk buckets. So how much risk do you want? That's the question I want you to take a moment, just pause and ask yourself is how much risk do I want, especially headed into retirement? And so that first risk bucket, that low to moderate risk one, the orange one, I like to call that really the safety bucket. And I almost rename these a little bit. You got safety, and you've got income / secure, and then you've got growth, which is going to be higher risk. So let's start with that safety, that low to moderate risk bucket. That's going to be the sleep good at night bucket, right? So it has specific characteristics. Number 1, typically it's going to be a more risk-free investment. So it's going to be your savings account, your emergency fund, maybe some CDs, money market, stuff that you can get your hands on. It's relatively liquid. So it's safe and it's liquid.
It's accessible very quickly.
It's accessible, fully accessible. You wouldn't include like a stock fund or individual stocks. Grain, cattle, if you're in the ag industry, I wouldn't put that in the safety bucket. If I have an emergency, I don't want to have to
sell a cow.
Try to sell a cow right away, or just sell at the spot price because I don't know what spot prices are going to be, and sometimes they're not very good. And then we could probably get away with including short-term CDs, but we don't want to include really long-term stuff in this bucket because we want it to be accessible.
Okay, so that's that first bucket. And it sounds like, a lot of people, when they think about building a financial plan, we're familiar with the term emergency fund. So is that kind of what you see as this bucket for people in retirement to be?
Yeah, so the emergency fund is an important piece of that bucket, but there's also things like goals that I'm saving for. It might be a down payment on a house. It could be a new car. It could be any number of things, a vacation. Those are usually, I'm saving for what I would call a shorter term goal, meaning I want to go buy a new car next year, so I want to start socking some money away for that. If I'm a younger couple, maybe that's a little bit of a longer term perspective, but I still don't want to put that money at risk. So that could be saving money for a house, a down payment on a house, as I mentioned. And so when we think about the emergency fund, we talk a lot about having 6 months of income, but instead what we like to talk about with this specific bucket is we want to have 6 months months of expenses.
Okay.
So we want to be able to, we're not necessarily looking at how much income do we have, we're looking at how much are we spending every month. So that means we've got to know what our budget is, right? We got to know, no matter what happens this month, these are the expenses that I'm going to have, right? And so we recommend that we would have at least 6 months out there. The bottom line is we wouldn't want to have less than 3 months worth of expenses.
But that can be really relative, right? Because I think that's the challenge. Often folks, especially if they haven't entered retirement yet, they don't always know how much they're going to be spending in retirement. Right. So how do you help people determine what their bucket should look like based on the expenses that they are not even sure they're, what that's going to look like yet?
Part of it is the written income plan that we talk about on the show every week. And the reality is, Stonebridge Wealth Systems, what's the system? Well, it's a good question. The system is the retirement compass. What's the retirement compass? It's a systematic approach to planning for a comprehensive, it's a holistic approach, if you will, to planning for retirement. It looks at income, investment, tax, healthcare, and legacy planning. Within there, notice the first one is income, because you don't live on your assets in retirement, you live off the income that they can produce.
Yes.
So we're gonna make sure we put an income plan together that's gonna look at a spending plan. Nobody likes thinking about a budget. Like, I want a budget, what I'm gonna have to sit at home and make sure that, I guess we can't go out to eat tonight because I'm over. I'm like, no. We're gonna put a spending plan together and make sure that you're able to do the things you wanna do in retirement. And then once we know what those expenses are gonna be, we're gonna plan accordingly for that emergency fund. So think about it, let's just bring it to just some real life concepts for folks out there that you can think about, why would I need this money? Because sometimes people say, well, Tim, I don't want money sitting idle, not being invested. I wanna make sure it's growing all the time, so I'm gonna put that in stocks. What if you had, let's go through a list, unexpected healthcare costs. You wanna make sure you have at least the amount of your deductible, assuming you have a copay style plan. This would be if you're maybe not retired quite yet. Temporary unemployment or loss of a job. If you're approaching retirement and you think you're gonna work till 66, let's say, most people retire or stop working a year or two earlier than they expect. They expected to work until 66 or 67, and then they end up working at till 64, 65. I don't know the exact stats, but we know that that's a reality, right?
Well, and just to interject here, there's a lot of forced layoffs happening right now. And I know a lot of people are feeling like the rug is being pulled out from underneath them when they're like, okay, I'm just gonna be here 1-2 more years. Well, bam, the company had a different idea, and we know that that's something that has to be planned for. Well,
and what if you didn't quite make it to 65 and you need to bridge the gap for things like healthcare expenses? Make sure you've got some money so you have some flexibility. Life's consistent inconsistencies. We talked about new tires on another show, easily $750. New water heater installed could be $1,400. Dishwasher in excess of $1,000. The cartridge, this happened to me. It's a real life example here. The cartridge inside of the Moen faucet handle on the shower where the kids take a bath, there's a little cartridge in there. It's only about this big. It broke.
Oh no.
It snapped. So couldn't turn the water off. Had to go downstairs, turn the main water supply off, have the plumber come out the next day. That was $400 to get that replaced. And it was this big, itty bitty, right? So there's all these things that can come up. These are just a few examples. It's why we need to make sure that we have a plan in place and that there's some money there available. It's safe, accessible, that we can use it for those emergencies that eventually will happen.
Well, and I think too, this really speaks to every situation is different. This is why no two written income plans that you and the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems put together are alike, because everybody's situation is different. And the only way that someone who's watching is going to be able to know, okay, how much should you have saved up in that safety bucket is if they come in and do the proper planning with you guys, right?
Yes, I mean, so all of that stuff is important when we are talking about having a financial plan and an income plan specifically. And so, I mean, like Tim mentioned, there's a lot of expenses that come up on, that are unexpected. And those were good examples of like the dishwasher, the hot water heater, the new tires and all that stuff.
And another one was just the other day. Like, again, I talked about the handyman who had to come over. And when he came over, I didn't know what was wrong. My wife said, hey, because my wife now, she's not teaching, right? She's taken this year off at least. She's gonna
with 3 baby girls at home, she's got her hands full.
She's got her hands very full. And so she really is in charge of making sure that the household runs. And she said, Tim, here's what's going on. This isn't working properly. So I called the handyman and he came over and I said, hey, here's the report I've got. Here's what I need fixed. Now, when he came in, he was there to diagnose the problem, right? And figure out what was the issue, and then use the correct tool in order to fix what the issue was. It's no different than, like, think about it this way. If you went in to a new doctor's office, right, and they bring you in and they have you fill out the form in the lobby, but you no more hand that form. This does happen, it seems like. You hand the form back and they call your name and you're like, well, they're going to read the form? Or
Right.
So they want to know what I wrote on there. And then you don't know if they really did. They take you back. They don't weigh you. They just take you in a room. They say, okay, sit up here on this butcher paper. Doc will be right in. No more does that door close. It swings back open. And in comes the doctor and he says, well, I think you need heart surgery, or think you need to replace, shoulder surgery or a knee replacement. You're thinking, well, aren't you going to put the little red thing on my finger and make sure that my blood oxygen is correct, and take my blood pressure, maybe weigh and measure, or do some sort of diagnostic test to find out what the problem is? It's no different with your finances. We need to be able to do the proper diagnostic test to figure out, well, do you have the right amount in the safety bucket? Do you have too much money in the safety bucket? There's a such thing as having too much there, because if you have a bunch of money that's just sitting in a money market account, not earning a whole lot, you're not even keeping up with inflation, you're just losing money safely. We want to make sure that we prevent that or correct that and get the proper amount in each of those buckets. That's what we're going to do. When you give us a call at that number at the bottom of your screen and go through and get that written income plan, you'll get it as soon as you call that number.
Thank you, Tim and Jeremy. We've covered so much ground already. It's hard to believe we just talked about one of the 3 buckets, so we definitely have a lot more to get to. But if this is resonating with you, if you want to know how much you need to have in each of these buckets, how much risk you should be taking with your money, or are you maybe taking too little risk? We're going to talk about that later on today's show. Again, the best way to find out is to come in and sit down and meet with one of the all-star advisors from the Stonebridge Wealth Systems team and get these questions answered for yourself. 866-256-7778 is that number to call to claim your complimentary written financial plan. Or if you'd rather connect online, if you simply pull out your smartphone, you can open up that camera app. Just point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from Stonebridge Wealth Systems will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary written financial plan that way as well. Stay with us. We'll be back with more on this important conversation regarding how much risk should you be taking right after this.
My story started when I was in college. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew it was going to be in the financial industry. I took a lot of accounting and finance classes. I thought I'd probably work in like a bigger company and work my way through maybe the accounting department. But then when I was doing a internship the summer before my senior year, I walked into a business. I was trying to sell magazine ads. I don't know if I call it magazine ads, but basically ad space in the back of the UNK student handbook and planner, which was a difficult sell because, nobody uses pen and paper planners anymore, at least not college students. But I made my best pitch to some financial advisors. I happened to be Scott Noctegal that I met with that day. When I went for the close and tried to see if he was ready to sign up for some ad space, he said, yeah, no, I'm not interested in that, but it takes a lot of courage to have somebody to be willing to walk into a business, especially a business that really doesn't cater to your target audience, to put yourself out there in a way that the odds of you being successful are probably pretty low. That's the type of person we'd be looking for at our firm. Have you decided what you want to do? And I said, no, I really haven't, but I only want to work with finance because I like numbers, and math's always been my favorite subject, and working with kind of complex equations, almost like a puzzle. And so that's really where it all began.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass. I'm Kristen Oakley here with both Tim and Jeremy from Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and a very important conversation we're having today about how much risk should you be taking, especially once you're in retirement, and with the money that you're using now to save for your retirement. We're using the analogy of Goldilocks. You don't want to have too much risk. You also don't want to have too little. You want to have the just right amount for you. And so again, we were talking about the 3 different risk buckets, and in the first segment, you guys did a great job explaining about the safety bucket. Let's now move to bucket number 2.
Yeah, so bucket number 2 actually has a dual purpose. We like to refer to it as either the income bucket or the growth without risk bucket.
Mm-hmm. So growth without risk, and I know we have a graphic we want to show of these different buckets, so we'll put that up here in case you're just joining us. So there it is.
Yeah, so the income bucket or the growth without risk bucket, if you want to think about the goal of that is, where am I going to get my income from? So we're looking for a goal of about 5% year growth that's going to provide future income. If I'm a farmer or if I'm a rancher, I don't want to have to go sell a cow or sell grain when the markets are down.
Yes.
That's not necessarily a liquid investment from that standpoint. So these are assets that you're actually going to truly live off of. So Social Security is a good example. That would go in that bucket. If I do have a pension, that would go into that bucket. So these are things that we're going to be able to rely on to provide us, I would call it stable income, that we don't have to necessarily do anything. That's just income that's coming in from that bucket.
Right, and you mentioned that dual purpose, right? So it's providing income. It's really something that people can tap into when they need it. I'm curious, what all sources of income do you include in this income bucket?
Well, so income, like I mentioned, Social Security would be one of the things. Pensions would be one of the things. Pensions have kind of gone by the wayside.
For a lot of folks,
I think it's only 15% of Fortune 500 companies are still providing pensions. So, but that would actually go into that bucket. But it's things that we're going to actually draw income from and live off of.
Right. Yeah. And that's the key. And I think that's where the misconception, a lot of times people think, oh, I've got this huge pot of money saved up. It's not about how much you've accumulated. That can play a role, but rather your ability to take that and then convert it into that reliable, ongoing, steady stream of income that's going to last you the rest of your lives. That's why you're so passionate about creating these written income plans to show people this is where your income's coming from.
Well, and the question then becomes, is that income guaranteed? Because there's some people say, well, I've got income from real estate, or I've got income from dividends, or I've got income from my CDs. Well, that's great, and I think it's great to diversify your income sources, but real estate can be volatile. You talked about 2008 earlier. Obviously, real estate didn't do so hot then.
Right.
So you could lose a tenant, and if you have low occupancy level, well, your income can go down.
Right.
If interest rates were to go back down to where they were over the last 10 years or so, 10 years historically, we had a period of time there where interest rates were effectively zero. Dividends can be cut, unfortunately. And so those are not necessarily guaranteed income streams. We think of them more like Social Security or pension as guaranteed income, but pensions have kind of gone the way of the dinosaur, like Jeremy said. So what do we do? Here's a real life example of a client who came in. And I'm basing this, by the way, off of a study that was done a couple of years ago by Ernst & Young. And so a large global auditing firm. And essentially what this study did is it said, look, if you, at a specific age, it said at age 55, if you took 10% of your nest egg and put it into a deferred income annuity with increasing income potential, would that increase or decrease your probability of being successful? In other words, would that increase your odds of making sure that your money lasts as long as you need it to? What if you took 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%? In each and every scenario, they ran that test. You ended up with not only more income with high security, high probability of success, but you actually had more money left over. Why? Because in the bad years, when the market goes down, we go through a bear market, which would be a 20% or more decline from a recent high. On average, that happens about every 5 years. About every 18 months, we have a correction, which is a 10%, but less than 20%. And then there's several pullbacks throughout the year over year. And so the reality is market volatility is a part of life. The problem is in the really bad years, those bear market years, the reason why most people aren't successful is they have a hard time sticking with things. And so this couple had come in and I asked him, why are you here? Like what
brought you in?
What brought you in? What specifically were we speaking about on the show that caught your attention? And he said, look, I feel like I've been kind of treading water for the last decade or so. I got hit real hard in 2008. And by the time I had lost about a third or more of my money, I said, I threw in the flag. I threw in the towel, raised the white flag and said, I give up. I can't be losing all this money that I've been working so hard for. And I got out of the market. And then after it started to recover is when I got back in. And I don't want to go through that again.
Right.
So here's what we did. They had about 1.5 million and they're in their early 50s, mid 50s, let's say. They had about 1.5 million in savings. What we did is I said, look, you want to retire in about 10 years. I think he was actually 57. He wanted to retire at 67. In order to generate the income you are going to need 10 years from now, we could take just $250,000, 16% of his overall portfolio, and put it in, follow this process, this methodology, if you will, that Ernst & Young has laid out, calling it a volatility buffer.
Right.
It only takes 16% of your total nest egg to guarantee income for the next 30 years of your life.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was the exact income that they were going to need. So if you think about the trade-off, if I could take 16% of what I've saved, put it into a bucket, and it's gonna guarantee that all of those basic expenses that I have, I'll never have to, by the time I get out of bed, right? I've already got all of my bills covered. All the things I want to do in retirement, whether it's spending time on the beach, in the mountains, in the RV, it doesn't really matter. We accounted for all of that when we built their written income plan. And then we ensured that the money that they would receive from this guaranteed income stream would fulfill all of those needs in retirement. That, I think, is what we have to start shifting our focus from. Because again, because pensions have kind of gone by the wayside and don't exist anymore, your income has to come from somewhere. If you don't want a retirement, here's what I would say. And this, I'll just leave our viewers with this. You really have two choices. You can either have a retirement based off of circumstance or based off of choice. So circumstance would be, well, I'm sorry, the market was down this year. It was a rough year. So you're going to have to postpone that vacation to Australia again, because now's not a good time to take that money out. Or I'm sorry, this thing happened overseas. Oil prices have gone crazy. And the market is just in such turmoil. I think now's a really bad time to sell. Because we have so much money in stock, I just don't think now's the time to be making these changes. So let's just go ahead and forego going on taking your family to the mountains to go skiing this year, whatever it might be. Or something happened on Wall Street, the next Ponzi scheme that we find out about, whether it's a Sam Bankman-Fried or some other thing. We don't want to be we don't want life to dictate to us whether or not we're going to be able to do things we want to do in retirement. That's a retirement based off of circumstance. Your other option is to have a retirement based off of choice. I choose to plan. For this couple, they chose to say, you know what, between Social Security and 16% of our nest egg, we're going to be able to do all the things we want to do, and everything else, all the other money, all the 84% above and beyond that, that's just discretionary for whatever we decide we want to do. If that sounds more like something that you'd want to experience in retirement, a retirement based off of your choices and not letting the circumstances of the world dictate to you whether you get to do the things you've always dreamed about, that's a reason to call that number.
Very well said. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. That number to call to claim your complimentary written financial plan from the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems is there on the bottom of your screen, 866-256-7778. Or if you'd rather connect online, simply scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. We'll be back with more on this important conversation of having the right amount of risk with your investment assets right after this.
If you think about the average American consumer, we don't talk about financial topics very often. And so we spend a lot of time at Stonebridge doing educational seminars and different things that are free of charge. If you're not educated in a topic, how do you make educated decisions? When you're working with a client, you're sitting down with them, they're a little stressed out, but after you go through the process and you really take time to educate them on not only what we're doing for them, but why we're doing it, that really gives them peace of mind, and you can see the weight just kind of drops. And when they leave, I hear all the time,
I really should have done this years ago. But sometimes there's a fear that somebody might try to sell us something. If the things that I can provide, if you don't need, or can't use those, I've got some good news for you. We're not going to sell them to you. We are fulfilling our fiduciary duty of putting their interests ahead of our own.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass, where today we are diving into the story of Goldilocks and the 3 risk buckets. And really, this is just a fun way to help our viewers understand the different types of risk. Are you taking too much? Are you taking too little? What's the appropriate and the right amount for you to be taking with your hard-earned money, especially as you approach and enter retirement? So we've talked about the first 2 risk buckets. We need to talk about the 3rd risk bucket. So let's pull up that graphic again, shall we?
Let's do it, yep.
All right.
So the 3rd is more high risk, so we call it the growth with risk bucket. And here's what I would say. This is where probably the folks that come into our office, I'd say 90% or more of their money's here. We talked in the beginning of the show how such a huge portion of 401ks and IRAs are shifted towards more at-risk investments. A big reason for that is because that's the stuff that's done really well lately, and they haven't rebalanced. So maybe they were 60-40 6 years ago or 7 years ago, and now they're 75-25 or 80-20 because they haven't adjusted for the fact that the stock portion has really grown and the bond portion has actually lost money. Here's what I'd leave people with, and then I'll throw it to Jeremy. But remember our discussion about Edward Smith? Who was he again?
He was the captain of the Titanic.
Captain of Titanic. Before they set sail, did he know that there was a chance that there was icebergs in the North Atlantic
Yes,
on
he
that
did.
fateful night? He
Yep.
did. And did he know that it was a moonless night and pitch black out there in the middle of nowhere?
Yes, he
He
did.
did. Did he know that there weren't enough lifeboats or life vests?
Yes, he did.
He did. But did he make any adjustments? Did he change course? Did he slow down?
Nope, they sped
No,
up.
he didn't. He sped up, full steam ahead. Why did he do that?
Well, they were trying to break records and make the news.
The
Make the
Titanic
news.
was unsinkable.
The Titanic was unsinkable. And sometimes I feel like when it comes to this bucket, when things are going well in the market, we start thinking like we're like the Titanic and that we're unsinkable. And so we still just full steam ahead. Tim, I'll call you when I need you. I'll call you in a time of crisis. That's usually what happens. People say, oh, we're going to put this money in stocks. And then you tell us how to fix it if it doesn't work out. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. Okay, now's the time to plan, not after something drastic has actually happened.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what else do you want our viewers to understand about this third critical bucket as part of their retirement plan?
Well, a lot of people are wondering, how much should I have in that bucket?
For sure, yeah.
You know, and so the thing that, there's kind of a couple rules of thumb real quick. One, the old consensus was you take the rule of 100. You take your 100, subtract your age, and that's how much you should have in that bucket. You know, and so that's been changed and modified a little bit. So now they're using 110 or 120. It really comes down to, in my opinion, what keeps you up at night, or can you sleep at night with market volatility? I've shared a story, I think on past shows, where I had recently got a client who invested $1 million 20 years ago. And when he became a client of mine, he brought $1,100,000 20 years later.
After it was being invested with another financial advisor.
After it was being invested with another financial advisor. And so why was that? Why did he only have $100,000 of gains? Well, he actually had more gains than that, but the problem was it would go up and it would come back down.
Right.
And so I think for our viewers at home, if you're sitting there trying to figure out, what should I do? What is the best plan of action for me? You're making a choice either way. You can bury your head in the sand, or you can say, you know what, I'm gonna take the bull by the horns. I'm gonna sit down and talk to Jeremy, Tim, and the team, and I'm gonna figure out what do I need to have in each of these buckets so that I can have a successful retirement when I'm ready to start drawing out of these buckets.
Sure.
So give that number a call and we'll sit down with you and walk you through it.
Wonderful. So much goes into this. I know we've just scratched the tip of the iceberg, if you will, but to really find out what the right amount of risk is for you, you want to get this complimentary written financial plan, 866-256-7778. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time here on the Retirement Compass.